Starting then, right?
Well,
good morning, everyone. My name is Ken Sauer, and I'm with the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, and we welcome you to the webinar on artificial intelligence in college settings, best practices that support student success and engagement. And we'd like to start the webinar off by asking Commissioner Lowry to make a few introductory remarks.
Well, Dr. Sauer, thank you so much. He knows I'm delighted to be here with you this morning, and good morning to all of you. Welcome to the Indiana Commission for Higher Education's Artificial Intelligence in College Settings webinar. Just so pleased you could join us. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules. We know your lives are full, and that you've allocated time for this indicates its importance. Thank you also to Dr. Lochmiller and our panel of extraordinary experts. I think this is going to be a great session. Dr. Sauer and I have been talking a lot over the last several months about artificial intelligence, and certainly it's ubiquitous to our news, and whether that's, from stock market reports to what we hear about in research and across just its various ways it already is impacting our lives and how it might. But we both shared, I guess I would paraphrase it as saying it's somewhat of a concern when we looked not long ago at a interesting article in The Economist. It was probably 2 months ago. And it was focusing to a great degree on the rise of the role of research in China and what those implications could be economically, national defense, and so forth. And to make a long story short, very near the end of the article, if you have a chance to read it, there was a small set of pretty startling statistics about research, specifically high-quality, peer-reviewed research on a global scale. And the reference was to artificial intelligence. There were really 15 areas at which this article looked, but the one really called out was artificial intelligence. And I believe it was in the most recent year of data, 2022, that globally, in that year, 10% of such research came out of the United States, 15% out of the EU, and 60% out of China. And that was startling to me. Certainly the entire article was, but I think that underscores just in one additional way why we're all gathered here today. Our hope and aspirations are for Indiana to be a top 10 state in utilization of artificial intelligence and generative AI, but to do so very thoughtfully and very planfully. This also aligns with what we call our HOPE agenda, Hoosier Opportunities and Possibilities Through Education, 7 areas aspirationally where we are seeking as a state to be a top 10. Very quickly, those include the college going rate for young people coming out of high schools, all of these by 2030, post-secondary rates for 3 populations, adult populations, which face a lot of challenges regularly, those who are veterans or in military service, individuals with disabilities, and the justice involved. The third one is to become a top state in the utilization of credit for prior learning. The fourth one is to become a top 10 in the area of completion. By the way, if you didn't know already, we are 11th in the nation now, so we're closing in on that, and that's certainly good news. Also to be a top state in retaining talent. All of your institutions just are remarkable. Indiana is one of the most attractive places students find to seek higher education, and we just want to retain more of those folks. And then really bringing all of those together to be a top 10 state in terms of economic and social mobility and prosperity. And then the last one is to be a top 10 state where an enterprise, someone knows they can grow their enterprise, bring their enterprise, or start an enterprise based on the strength of human capital. So we believe aspiring to be a top 10 state, however that might be determined in artificial intelligence and how we approach it, just dovetails quite effectively. The results of all of these things certainly lead back to economic and social mobility and prosperity for our fellow Hoosiers and those who might wish to come to our state and join in this. We think we have just a grand opportunity to elevate Indiana and in turn our nation by the work going on here. Very briefly, I would share that prior to some meetings last week in Bloomington for our regular commission meetings, I had an opportunity to meet with students at one of the local high schools, Bloomington North, and then on campus, in fact, with 21st Century Scholars, which is always delightful. But it was interesting to me in speaking with those students how they're already using artificial intelligence. I was impressed, whether it's creating outlines or study guides, helping them to think about project management of, project-based learning. I was just so impressed. The list was long, and those are only a few examples. But again, in my view, this underscores the potential for our students, for faculty, even the operation of our institutions, writ large, being even more efficient and effective, and certainly then leading to the bigger calls, even beyond what we are doing within higher education, to what's going on in that broader society we serve, and whether that's the way, again, we think about economic and social mobility and prosperity, the impact to enterprises, to firms that wish to locate in Indiana, and broadly to the state of our state, if you will. So I could go on because, as Dr. Sauer knows, I am deeply delighted that all of you are taking time to delve into this, to place a marker and say, we are going to continue to come together to look at generative AI, artificial intelligence, and to better understand how we, in the areas in which we operate, can positively impact the state, thoughtfully doing so. And I literally can't think of a better group to be doing this in Indiana than those of you who are connected to this work already through our institutions and other partners who might be joining us today for this webinar. So I'm looking over toward Dr. Sauer here, but thanking him certainly, and thanking all of you, Dr. Lochmiller, our panelists, just terrific folks. And again, all of you who have taken time. I see the number continuing to click up of folks who are signed on for this today. So thank you. And we'll look forward to being with you virtually and in person going forward for more of these types of sessions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lowry. And let me echo the Commissioner's expression of gratitude to Dr. Lochmiller and the panelists for being here today and the preparatory work that went into setting up this webinar. This session will be recorded, and all those who registered for the webinar will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. We would also, in that email, send a short survey to get some additional feedback from everyone who attended the session. Rachel Martin, who is with me in the room, and I will monitor the chat for questions and comments. Now, while we have disabled the cameras and mics of all participants, the chat function is very much in use, and we would encourage your feedback, your questions. If there are short questions that perhaps would clarify a particular term or point that was made, we might break in at that point. Otherwise, if the questions are a bit more complex, we would reserve those until the end of the webinar, time permitting. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Lochmiller, who will moderate the panel.
All right, thank you so much, Ken, and good morning, everyone. We're thrilled to have you joining us. As the commissioners mentioned, artificial intelligence has had a profound influence on industries throughout Indiana, and higher education is no different. With the changes introduced by this transformative technology, we want to spend some time this morning discussing what are and what could be the opportunities for the state's institutions of higher education, as well as the challenges that this technology introduces for students, faculty, and staff. To help us with this conversation, we're pleased to be joined by three experts on this subject today who have graciously agreed to share their time with us. Our panelists include Dr. Chris Brinton, the Elmore Rising Star Associate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Purdue University, West Lafayette, Justin Dammeier, who is the Assistant Vice President of Educational Technology and Instructional Design at Ivy Tech Community College, and Dr. Ann Leftwich, the Associate Vice President for University Information Technology Systems and a Professor of Instructional Systems Technology at Indiana University. As our panelists are aware, our discussion today will focus on 4 big areas. For the first part of the conversation, we will focus on the current landscape of artificial intelligence. In discussing this topic, we'll do some level setting and focus on what we know about the changes this technology is introducing for students, in classrooms, and at our institutions of higher education. Next, we'll move into best practices for instructors in our institutions and probe some specific examples drawn from current practice. Then we'll look at some of the opportunities that partnerships with industry have for the expanded use and adoption of AI in higher education. And finally, we'll explore opportunities that are rising because of this technology and how we, as a state and as institutions of higher education, can harness its incredible potential in the years ahead. With that, we'll turn now to the first portion of our discussion. So let's start by looking at the current landscape of artificial intelligence. To do this, we need to define AI in broad terms. I'll start by paraphrasing Hamilton and Swanston's definition of AI, which was cited in Forbes magazine. Artificial intelligence is simply when machines execute tasks that have traditionally required human cognition and decision-making. AI-powered programs, devices, and services can make decisions, solve problems, understand and mimic natural language, and learn from unstructured data. Generative AI, which is another technology that we'll be talking about today, is a derivation of this larger technology, and it uses what we call deep learning models that can take raw data and learn to generate new content when asked a specific question or prompt. This technology has profound implications for our work in classrooms and higher education. Indeed, in education, this technology has fueled the use of AI-powered games, adaptive learning platforms, grading, feedback, chatbots that support student engagement, and intelligent tutoring. Indeed, these technologies have potentially far-reaching impacts on the ways in which we work, learn, and engage. Justin, with this as our starting point, what should our institutions of higher education be focusing on as this technology matures and becomes more common in our classrooms?
I think that's a great way to start us off today. And candidly, I think there's probably so much we need to focus on. I don't know that I can cover it in a very short, concise answer. But I think first and foremost, our institutions need to focus on the development of clear guidance for faculty, staff, and students regarding the use of generative AI within their academic coursework, within student feedback from instructors, content curation and creation, and then even extending on to institutional data practices. In my opinion, the policies really should provide the framework by which members of the institution's community can freely explore the technology in an effort to understand its impact on their personal productivity, technology, teaching and learning, right? I think we also need to create the space for authentic exploration and understanding of the benefits and risks associated with generative AI so that the members of our community can really feel empowered to develop their understanding and then find ways to innovate within their own scope of work for the institution. I think second, we have to find ways to close the equity gap, right, and make these tools widely available to students, faculty, and staff. I think much of the conversation on generative AI tools rightly focuses on the students and their access, right? We don't want to exacerbate the digital divide, but I think we also need to make sure that faculty and staff have access to a variety of tools that can positively influence the work that they're being done across the institution. I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach is likely to meet the needs of everybody. So institutions taking the time to really investigate the tools that are out there, both those general tools like Copilot, Gemini, Perplexity, etc., and then some of the other specific tools that have a really kind of more of a niche application within the space. So doing that, I think, can help the majority find efficiencies and do the work that they're doing a little bit better, right? I think finally, we need to assess the impact of these tools on teaching and learning. So how do we recognize the impact of the tools on our students' understanding of the material and focus, less on the mere acquisition of knowledge, and then leverage the generative AI to reinforce critical thinking, creativity, complex problem solving, and make sure we're really getting into the material the way that we should. So for example, we have a faculty member here on our Terre Haute campus who uses ChatGPT to create unique patient case studies for nursing students. So what used to take a prohibitive amount of time to be able to get that variety and multiple scenarios and different variables can now be created in a matter of minutes. So the time and energy of faculty spent on analyzing that information can be turned and spent on working with students to really delve into what those case studies mean, how they analyze that data, and how they improve their practice. So the potential is great, but I think those are a couple of starting points that we can look at and make sure that we're prioritizing a human-centered approach, right? Our human judgment, empathy, and contextualization and recognition of nuance cannot be replicated by AI. And so there's no substitute for building strong relationships in and out of the learning environment. So I think those are a couple of ways that we can initially focus on the impact of generative AI in our institutions.
Fabulous. So I'll open it up to our other panelists. Chris or Anne, do you want to chime in on this question?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and agree with everything that Justin just said, the other element is really prioritizing AI literacy across disciplines. So making sure that it's not just limited to the people who we think do AI or computer science, right, situated in the computer science departments. So I think looking at that, trying to figure out how do we help all of our different disciplines identify different ways, and exactly what the commissioner had said at the beginning of this. How do we make sure that Indiana is moving forward, is being seen as a leader? And I think in order to do that, we need to look to how are the professions and the different fields using AI. So for example, like in the healthcare sector, there was a Journal of Medical Education in 2021 that was talking about how medical professionals were trained in AI concepts, were more confident in using those AI-powered diagnostic tools, leading to improved patient outcomes. So looking at that and figuring out how do we integrate those particular skill sets for our students, or in humanities. There's a huge area around digital humanities where students are analyzing large data sets of historical texts or artwork using AI algorithms. Being able to understand those and recognize potential biases in the data or algorithms is going to be important for those students moving forward and looking at those elements. Or of course, business students, right? The Journal of Business Education talked about the importance of having AI knowledge, that we're more competitive in the job market. So how do we make sure that AI is incorporated into those courses around marketing strategies or consumer analytics or even financial forecasting, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can talk about it. And even more so, like a really creative example that someone here on the IUB campus was using in design studies. They're developing their own model for students to be able to interact with it and identify what do clients want from particular design situations. How can we customize that? How do we make it different? How do we provide feedback to the model? So I think there's a wide range of making sure that our students have the AI literacy as well. And that comes in helping showcase what it can do for those different disciplines.
Fabulous. Chris, did you want to jump in here?
Sure, yeah, and agree with everything that was just said as well. The only thing I would add to that, I guess, coming from more of the engineering side of things, is just that ultimately the students and the faculty, I guess, are the end consumers of this AI technology that would be used in the classroom. And so I think that we should also be looking, and one of the prioritizations should be to actually encourage students to get involved in research that goes into developing these tools and looking how to adapt existing AI tools to what may be necessary in the classroom, right? Because who knows better than the way we learn than the students themselves, right? And the same thing with faculty, right? I mean, encouraging the faculty to also get involved, particularly those who do have the expertise in AI and ML, to look at this domain and all of the interesting research questions that are there that are required to be solved in order to make these tools the most effective, right? Because there's so many different potential use cases, right? Whether it's providing predictive analytics and understanding how students are consuming behavior, or it's even going so far as to give personalized interventions through AI and assisting instructors in doing their jobs better. I think that from our perspective, we could do a much better job of really promoting this as a very important research area that goes across many different disciplines.
Fabulous. Thank you. So let me follow up to the first question that and one of the things that he said is that we need to provide sound guidance to our faculty and to our instructors about how to use this technology. Justin, I'm going to start back with you again. How do we identify productive versus unproductive uses of this technology, and how do we use that understanding to inform the guidance that we provide?
Yeah, I think it's another good question. And, I think that that's going to be highly discipline specific, right? What is productive in one space may not be productive in another space, right? And I think about the guidance that we've provided, we need to understand that. If we don't understand that the way somebody in the humanities may want to choose to integrate these tools into their teaching and learning versus somebody in visual arts or IT or otherwise, I think we're going to lose the trust of our faculty when we start to talk about those conversations and have those conversations. So that's got to be first and foremost, right? How does this apply to the discipline? And then how's that going to affect the students that are using that? And I think beyond that, then, how are we really assessing the impact of that tool, right? Are we really augmenting the experience, or are we merely replacing something else that's currently being done? And I think that's kind of the key to understanding that within each discipline, right? So when we can have those conversations, and I think to what Christopher said earlier, how are we engaging with the students in this? Right? What feedback are they giving us? Right? We can sit there and have a conversation with each other, with our colleagues, and we can try different things in the classroom, try different tools. But if we're not getting the students' perspective on how that's impacting them and their learning, then we'll also have an opportunity to miss the mark. So I think it's a collective effort to make sure that we're assessing those tools, discipline specific, getting our student feedback, and making sure we really have that opportunity to augment that experience. And then also keep an eye towards the ethical implications, right? And understanding how the tools are giving us information and understanding how we assess those.
Fabulous. Anne, I wonder if you could give some examples from the IU system, given the work that the University Faculty Council has done producing a report on artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. So I have this here, and then I served on the task force so that y'all can see. The task force report is a little red button a little bit lower down if you wanted to read the full report. Really just captivating. Everybody wants that to read those kind of reports, right? But I think there are a lot of other ones out there too, where different universities have looked at how do we approach generative AI, what might be some guidelines. There are some particularly good ones where there are inserts into different syllabi, right, of what this could look like. Those parts are all really helpful, I think, especially for faculty that are concerned about what it might look like. I almost wonder if there could be some kind of like question oriented thing that says like, would you feel comfortable with this or this? And then imports that and comes up with like an output. So anybody that wants to create that, I'm happy to have like, creative rights thought of by Anne. I'm sure AI has already thought about it though. But in terms of the different things that we're looking at IU is we're still trying to identify what this actually looks like. We haven't had to update any kind of policies around academic dishonesty because just because it's a new tool, it still fits under a lot of the other different elements of our student academic dishonesty code. If a faculty member says don't use AI and they can prove that you use AI, which you really can't, but if a student admits that they have used AI, then that's an academic misconduct that can move forward, right? And I think that's the thing to talk about here is how to be able to judge versus not if your students are using AI. And I know that conversation of facilitating academic dishonesty is a really challenging one to wrap our heads around. And I think I would equate this back to think about when Wikipedia first came out. Everyone was very concerned that folks were just copying and pasting from Wikipedia and being able to look back on that. The calculator would be one before that, right? So everyone was very concerned about what that would look like. So we're increasingly having new technology tools, and what we should be thinking about in education is how do we change that and make it so that it becomes an asset as opposed to a deficit. In other words, I've heard of some really great strategies around, instead of saying you can't use AI, to ask students to submit the transcript of them interacting with the AI so that you can see what are they learning, what's coming out of it, what might that look like, or to have those real conversations with your students to say, I understand you might want to use this as a brainstorming tool, that's fine, but here's where it would fall short. Or also having people look on to say, like, have an answer to a particular like historical problem or whatever that might look like, but then think about what do you agree with and what don't you agree with, and what information can you pull to kind of like counteract what the AI is saying here. So I think there are a lot of really creative ways to be able to still use the AI, because I'm specifically thinking about writing in particular, that a lot of educators are very apprehensive, and rightfully so. I get why that's happening, but I think that if we can think more creatively about what our assessments are going to look like, or how we assess learning, I think we will be farther ahead and provide the students with more relevant demonstrations of their learning that hopefully can apply to their futures.
Fabulous. Chris, did you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I very much agree with what Ann just said. I wanted to add one point, just given the point about proving whether somebody's used AI, and also the comment that Sean had made in the chat there. So I guess it's a question of how you define proving it. Do we need a human to be able to prove it, or would we be comfortable relying on AI to prove that somebody used AI? Because there are actually a lot of ongoing efforts in developing AI-based tools to prove whether an output came from a large language model versus from a human generation. And there's some very nice results that have been published in that space recently. Now, of course, one of the challenges with that is just how fast these large language models also evolve, right? And so trying to keep up with that, essentially you have to keep training and retraining the models to basically identify new patterns that are being learned and all of that. But there are certain aspects, and also comparing like any writing samples you have from a person against what they're submitting and all that. Just, I guess, how you'd be able to say, well, I don't know if this person would have been able to come up with this, entirely on their own. But yeah, I think there's, that itself is another interesting opportunity. But it's also uncomfortable, right? Because one of the ways that people do it is actually by using other large language models to try to ask, is this output coming from a large language model? And similarly, people are using large language models now to evaluate the quality of outputs from other large language models. So, for example, some people may use, outputs from Llama to evaluate responses they're getting from ChatGPT, or ask Llama how effective is this output. And that's sort of like the accepted way of doing evaluation right now of large language models, which is a little concerning, right? Because you're basically like, you're just asking another one of these systems to check, what are their competitors, essentially. So a little bit uncomfortable, but I think there are ways that we can look at trying to do this detection if we want. And then the last point I just wanted to reemphasize is that, our students are entering a world now where these large language models are becoming commonplace, right? And so I think teaching them how to interact with them effectively and in ethically correct manners, maybe even checking results that they get, is probably, whether we like it or not, it's probably necessary to do that.
So I want to go ahead and shift to the next portion of our conversation, because your comments have actually already started to move in that direction. Much of the debate about artificial intelligence has focused on its potential risks to education and to the student experience. This partly reflects the wide gap between the proportion of students who reportedly use AI, which is estimated to be about 85%, compared with the proportion of faculty who reportedly use AI, which is estimated to be about 15%. Indeed, this gap is centered on many what-if scenarios, where a student uses AI in ways that depart from our expectations about traditional classroom instruction, a model that has long emphasized a space where faculty present information, students acquire information, and then students report their understanding of the information back to the faculty member for assessment. Faculty have expressed concerns about that AI will enable students to access information for exams and use technology to produce essays and assignments, and these are legitimate concerns from an assessment perspective. Indeed, as one article in Times Higher Education noted, much of the debate has centered on academic integrity, and you've already heard that in some of our panelists' comments this morning. Yet there are also many opportunities presented by AI for instructors in higher education. For example, AI has the potential to reduce administrative workload on faculty, shift assessment practices, and stimulate the use of learning analytics. It also creates opportunities for personalization, not only in terms of instruction, but in terms of the student experience in higher education. So, Anne, I'm going to turn to you now. Given what we currently know about this technology, how do we navigate some of these ethical tensions that arise as this technology is adopted within classrooms in our institutions of higher education?
Thanks, Chad. And so, as we bring AI into our classrooms, I think we're facing some ethical dilemmas that we need to address head on. For example, and my biggest concern is if a student's using an AI tool like ChatGPT to write an essay for them, on the surface, they may be submitting a well-written paper, but are they actually learning anything from the material? And then also, what about originality, plagiarism concerns, all of the other things around this? And one of the really interesting points that I heard from a student was, I'm concerned that if I use AI, that I haven't developed my voice yet as a writer. And that won't allow me to develop my voice as a writer. So I thought that was a really mature perspective. So I think for me to navigate those particular tensions, I think it's really important for institutions to set clear guidelines, or maybe not clear guidelines, but say options for faculty to choose from, right? So there is faculty voice, and whatever that looks like. Of course, that becomes a little bit more challenging for students because they have to adapt to different teachers' questions or concerns. But I think that faculty can encourage students to cite AI as assistance they receive, much like they would submit with any other source, right? This helps with a lot of things. It promotes transparency. It helps maintain academic integrity. And then again, students are really kind of engaging with the faculty member with their expertise, right? Like, what are the things that I'm missing at here? Or what could I add? In particular, I really like the idea of having a student reflect and summarize at the end of each assignment to say, what did you learn from your interactions with AI? And it could be as simple as, I recognized that there weren't enough clear examples, and I really wanted to include more examples. So I asked ChatGPT for 4 or 5 different examples, and this is the one I came up with, and this is why I included it. This is why I think it's a good example. So I think almost a reflection on whatever their final thing that they submitted to showcase, here's what I learned, or even if we're talking about mastery learning, to say, here are the objectives of things that I wanted to learn. Again, I'm talking more about the writing pieces or the creative pieces. Here are the different rubric elements that I wanted to address. Here's how I think I addressed those, and here's what I learned from that. I think another real ethical concern that our students are not thinking about is data privacy. And suppose an AI platform used in class is going to collect student data to personalize those learning experiences. What are we doing as institutions to ensure the data is protected and that the students are then aware of how their information is being used? And so can AI just be used to create the reflection? So that is a really good point. I think that if you're justifying why you picked the things you did, sometimes using the technology actually creates more work for you. And it's almost like writing it down, like when your teacher allows you to write down all of the notes, right, to take into your test. a lot of times you've actually learned what it was just by writing down all of those notes, right? So, and I've seen, you know, some college classmates of mine that did use Wikipedia and went through and tried to like edit everything. And it seems like they learned just as much from going through and editing everything, right? From the cheating aspect. So I guess it depends on how far the student wants to go to not have to do the work, but they are demonstrating the work or that they're able to do things. And I guess, again, that comes back to the challenge of, it sounds like we need to create better assessments or better assignments then, right? How do we actually evaluate the learning?
So, Anne, I want to just ask a follow-up question to what you just shared. What I hear you describing is that one of the ways that we can address the ethical concerns with the use of AI in classroom instruction is by actually making the conversations that students have with AI visible. Can you offer some examples from your role at IU as maybe some productive ways that you've seen that happen, or some other best practices that you think would be useful for folks to know about?
So I think having open and honest conversations, just like you would in parenting or with any other topic, like these are the best ways to actually identify the learning or whatever's happening. I think some of the example that I shared before of like submitting what was your conversation with the AI chatbot being turned in. I think that's one way to help see what's happening and what that might look like. There are different samples that you can put in your syllabus too, if you don't want to have the conversation. But again, we all know how often students, you know, go through your syllabus and read your syllabus. I don't know if the other panelists have other examples too that they would want to share and address Chad's question, because I think it's a really good one.
Justin, do you want to go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, it's not an easy answer, right? And it's not an easy practice because it is incredibly challenging. You're seeing the comments in the chat, right? We're always going to see somewhat of an arms race, right? Students versus faculty. And I think if we create an environment where it is always that, if it is the student versus the faculty member, we're both going to lose. It's a lose-lose proposition. So I think to what Anne's been saying multiple times is that we have to have those strong relationships. Now, I will grant you, particularly in the online space, that is incredibly challenging, right? Because you're not in the classroom with them physically to have that conversation. So you have to have different ways and methods to quote unquote humanize that experience within the online space, right? You've got to take extra effort, extra consideration to build those relationships. But I do believe at the end of the day, it is the relationship between the faculty member and the student that will win the day. If you can have that open, honest conversation from the start, right? Like I would choose to engage with my students if I'm in an online space or even in a face-to-face class. Let's do something to engage with a tool at the outset and use that to start that conversation with what my expectations are versus what the expectations of the students are, right? We've got to have that level set and that norm reference just like we would in almost any consideration. So I think those are some of the things that we can do to get started. But I think moreover, our faculty and staff have to have time and space to understand the tools. They have to have time and space to explore. They have to look at how they're going to teach differently with these tools. And if we don't offer them that and we don't offer them opportunities for some development time, then again, that's also going to create a lose-lose proposition. So I think it's a complex answer, right? And there are multiple things that we can do as an institution to be able to help support our faculty, but it is that time and space and conversation. And then let's also create an environment in which our faculty can take some risks. Right? If we don't allow those faculty to safely explore these tools, insert those tools into their classes, and then really get that feedback from students because something quote unquote might go wrong, right? Then that's also going to create an environment where we're not going to have an opportunity to get better with the use of these tools. So I think those are just some of the things that we can do. But again, I'm interested to see what others have to say and feel about that because it is a complex answer.
So, Justin, I wonder if I could just ask a follow-up question to what you just shared. How do you think this would look different at Ivy Tech versus at IU Bloomington or Purdue West Lafayette?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And I think here it looks differently because predominantly the makeup of our faculty is quite different in some respects, right? We rely heavily on an adjunct pool of instructors, right, to be able to supplement our excellent full-time faculty. So I think that is something that we have to acknowledge, as well as we have to do more to be able to support those industry specialists, those subject matter experts that are coming to us to help share that. And so that takes a little bit more time and effort, right? I think our full-time faculty, right, have a lot more time and space in some cases less because they have other responsibilities at the college, but they can focus on that a little bit differently than our adjunct population can. And so we have to be able to arm them with those same resources. And I think perhaps that's probably a little bit different for us than it is for our colleagues at 4 years who may or may not rely so heavily on the adjunct population.
Chris, what about from your perspective? What do you see as being some of the issues here?
Yeah, I think I would like to go back to the point about the privacy aspects, because that's so before the rise of large language models, I think that was one of the key bottlenecks and concerns that that we have, around essentially AI in the classroom, right? And so I actually, did a lot of research for many years, just looking at ways we can use students' behavioral data that's being captured, say, like while they interact with the video. So there's sequences of pauses and fast forwards and rewinds and so on, to understand how they're consuming knowledge, and what their learning strategies might be, right? And use these as signals of knowledge transfer, not to assign them grades or anything like that, but potentially to, identify areas of weakness, or areas where somebody may need additional help, or areas where somebody's already competent and doesn't need, additional support. And the issue with that was always, well, you're using my data, it's privacy restrictive, and so on. And really, I think much like in many other industries, I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but to the next topic that we're going to switch to. But much like in any other industries, the way to encourage people to be more comfortable with, sharing their data is to, explain that you're doing everything possible to keep their data confidential, and prevent potential security breaches and all of that. And then B, to tell them the potential, or explain to them the potential advantages, right, that they can gain from providing access to their data. Even potentially having multiple tiers, right? Like, so if you only give very high level data about yourself, to AI, this is what it can provide to you. If you're willing to provide this much more data, it can provide you these additional benefits in the classroom. If you're willing to give it, full access, then you can obtain this many more benefits. Just like in, say, when you go and browse through Facebook or Instagram, the data that's being collected is, hopefully, I think, being used for good reasons, and as well as bad reasons. But the good reasons being that you can get much more personalized content that's well fitted to you, right? And so I think that's one of the key aspects in terms of how we encourage, encourage people to be more comfortable with the use of this technology.
A great point. And I want to just connect with something that Anne actually shared in the chat here a minute ago. She said, how can we capture the learning? And in part, that's a good question, because it raises the prospect that someone has become comfortable enough with AI that they can actually see it as a value added, or as something that actually strengthens the classroom experience. So Anne, Chris, Justin, how do we actually maybe see AI as a value added to the classrooms that we have in our institutions of higher education? And in what ways is this technology allowing us to do things in classrooms that we haven't been able to do before?
So I think so most of my research is focused on how to get K-12 teachers to adopt and use technology. And from what I have found is it's usually tied to some kind of core belief that's internal to the particular educator. Usually at the elementary level, it is focused on, if I can show you the power that this would have for children in the future. It's usually more focused on, like, I care so much about my kids and I want my kids to be prepared for the future. For the secondary areas, it's usually about my discipline, and I love my discipline. How do I get, how does this make my discipline better, more engaging, more effective, etc.? I think there's a combination of that when we're talking about college faculty as well. Talking with them about how it is necessary to prepare our students for their future, become leaders in Indiana, and to get whatever job that is going to make our institution, you know, more highly ranked or better alumni placed, or whatever the motivation is going to be on that side. But I think it comes back again to discipline specific ways, or ways that I can save time. So I think everybody on this call will say overwhelmingly in higher education, we are placing more and more on our plates every day, and the time is becoming less and less. So usually what happens for me as a way to get faculty excited about AI is I use Microsoft Teams, and I have this lovely thing called Copilot. So when we're having that meeting that could have been an email, it is being captured with Copilot, and I don't have to sit there and take notes. It comes up with a summary at the end of it, and then it comes up with key action items that are really phenomenal. And that's usually one of the first things that faculty have said, wow, well, this is going to help save me time. Then the next thing that I do is I show them, now let me show you how you can create assessments for your class, right? So upload this particular document, create an assessment for that class. It comes back with multiple choice answers. Say, well, I'd really like it to be more like case multiple choice answers, right? Like more applied instead of just general knowledge. It comes back with those questions. Now I'd like you to provide feedback for each one of those questions, and I'd like it to be robust feedback. So at least for me, now I can copy and paste those into Canvas, and I've got a really amazing quiz that's analyzing, you know, where are students understanding, what does this look like, et cetera, et cetera. Another really huge piece was taking, I know I'm talking more about productivity things, but these are all elements of helping to save time for faculty so that they can devote themselves to learning the next tool or thinking about what their assessment might be. And even engaging back and forth with the AI to ask questions about, I'm going to deliver this topic in my class. What might be some ways to connect this to real world topics that college students might care about? Right? So different ways to be able to put that out there and to try and connect with your students or what that might look like, or ask them about assessments. How can I create a more authentic assessment? Or even asking about your discipline. I typically study nursing. What are some ways that AI is being used in nursing? Right? There are so many different ways that this is going to be able to save you time, to make things more engaging, to make it more applicable to your students. And if that hasn't convinced you yet, there's one last thing that I'm going to paste in here and share. Are we allowed to share our screen, Chad, to show something?
You should be able to, yep.
Okay, so I'm going to paste it in there so they have the link later. But this for me is a real game changer because it's both for teaching and learning and also for research purposes. So this is Illuminate. This is an experimental Google lab. You can take a complex, so here everyone can see the large language model encode clinical knowledge, which if you're looking at this does not look like something you'd like be super excited to listen to. Maybe some of you, maybe Chris would be especially excited to read that one. But so this one, what they've done is they've uploaded this and they've changed it into a podcast. Listen to the voices. It is just uploaded. It turns it into a script and then automatically includes the voices. These are digital voices.
Ready to break down some research? This paper, Large Language Models Encode Clinical Knowledge, explores how well large language models, LLMs, can understand and answer medical questions. It's a pretty relevant topic, especially with the growing interest in AI in healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, can these super smart language models, like the ones that power chatbots and write articles, actually be useful in a medical setting? That's a pretty big deal.
Exactly. And the paper introduces this new benchmark called Multimed QA to test these models. Could you tell us more about that?
Right. Multimed QA is this super cool benchmark that combines a bunch of different medical question answering data sets. Some are from professional medical exams, some are from research papers.
So again, those are digital voices. And I just want to make clear that that is taking something that's really complicated, making it understandable at a conversational tone. So great for students, great for dissemination of your research that helps faculty get whatever, complicated topic out to more individuals. So I think thinking about things differently, this has made me think I'm going to go back to my articles and create podcast scripts that I can go back and forth with someone on. And how wonderful is that then to move my ideas forward, both for my students and then I think for greater impact on the public.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Ann. Justin or Chris, do you want to jump in and share your perspectives from your institutions as well? Justin, how about
Sure.
you go first?
Yeah, no problem. One, I'm stunned by this. So and thanks for sharing. That's fantastic. But it does make me think about a couple of other things I've seen happen, right? And whatever we can do as faculty to try to find a way to do something differently or better or more engaging, right? So I've seen some examples where faculty will take, maybe they've recorded a lecture, right? And they just want to create an FAQ, right? So they'll be able to take the transcript from Zoom, right? Feed that into one of these tools and create an FAQ around what that was. And that might just help them get a start. But I always go back to that, like these tools for me help me get over that initial task initiation hump and start to create something, right? Because I think we can think a lot about what we want to do, how we want to be able to do it. So I think the time saver for faculty is we can have these tools do some of those things for us. And then we can come back in and make them better. We can refine them. We can do some things to it, but it saves time in that initial creation, right? Or maybe there is an area of visual that I want to be able to create. Maybe I don't have a visual talent, but I think that would really help my students. So I can use these tools to be able to create one, right? That I might not have been able to do. I didn't have a resource to be able to do. So what are those little things that I can do to make that content more accessible to my students and more understandable by my students? I'm still blown away by this podcast idea. I'm really, it's got my head turning. But I think those things, and then, I'm a big proponent of open education resources, and we're really trying to make inroads here at Ivy Tech with how faculty can adopt that. But not maybe adopted in whole, right? I mean, there are very good publisher materials out there, but there are oftentimes gaps that exist in that content. So maybe I can have ChatGPT or other tools be able to identify some of those gaps for me and help me be able to curate resources in a more timely fashion, right? So that way, if you're not an expert in that area, you have an opportunity to be able to go find some things. And like turn that on the other side around to student research, right? It can be a really effective way to help students do research, right? I've oftentimes told individual faculty that this is like Google, but on steroids, right? Because you can feed it context and you can have it do some initial analysis for you and help our students identify which sources may be more applicable and not, and then they can go take a deeper dive into some, and it saves them time in curating that. So they ultimately can do a better job. Now, if we don't teach them how to do that, we don't have conversations about whether they should or shouldn't and how they should engage with that, then that's a different conversation. But I think those are some other ways that we can use this to be able to benefit faculty. And as they take that time to explore, then I think that demystifies this and it's seen more as a learning tool and not as a tool to cheat, right? So I think that's what we have to change that narrative.
Chris, did you want to weigh in here as well?
Yeah, I think we need to do a better job of integrating the AI tools actually into dashboards that instructors can be provided, whether it's, Blackboard or Canvas, or Purdue, we're using Brightspace. These learning management systems currently aren't the, I'll say, most advanced demonstrations of AI. And a lot of them times they're also a little bit clunky as well. But exploring actual integrations of AI models to be able to, again, predict somebody's not understanding something, make estimations in that respect, make recommendations maybe for social connections that people should form if there are two students in the classroom that maybe are feeling isolated or for whatever reason, and maybe could work together and exchange knowledge and exchange information together. The other part too that there's always concerns about, and this isn't just with education, but it's for AI more generally, in addition to the privacy angle, is also a bias angle, right? And a fairness issue, right? So it's been proven that, since AI models are trained, of course, they're biased towards the majority, right? Because they're going to be biased towards whatever is giving them the most data that's potentially available. And so also looking at ways that we can debias these types of analytics around different demographic groups that exist, and help minority populations more don't have all of their information necessarily lost in the sea of large amounts of data that are being generated, and make sure that the models actually retain predictive information for them as well. So that's actually one of my ongoing research areas, is actually looking at this way of debiasing predictive analytics, basically, for students, particularly in this case in online courses. But we found that we can basically get the best of both worlds in terms of being able to improve the prediction quality overall, in terms of the amount of or the accuracy at which we can make predictions about what people are understanding and what they're not understanding, and also reduce the variance that exists in the prediction across different subgroups. So I'll share a link to that as well.
So one of the questions that actually just popped up in the chat, and Chris, thanks for sharing that link, is can you recommend free AI platforms that faculty can use to enhance their teaching effectiveness? Are there specific tools or platforms or resources that the three of you would maybe point folks to so that they could actually delve into this a little more deeply?
So tools that they could directly integrate, I'm actually not entirely sure. Say tools that you could freely use and just integrate with Canvas or Blackboard or or Brightspace. Of course, these external tools, like of course the large language models we've been talking about, ChatGPT being one of them, of course. There's other free and open access ones as well, provided by Google has one, Meta has one as well. But yeah, in terms of AI itself, like integrating into a learning management system, I'm not exactly sure that there's one that's free right now.
Justin, I see you included some things in the chat. What are a couple of the resources that you included in there?
Yeah. So if I'm doing research, I really like to do Perplexity AI. I think that's a really good tool. You can ask it really good questions. It will prompt you with some follow-up or more information, or what about this? And it is really good about providing the source information, right? And looking at different sources outside of just the web. So I think that's a good one if you're really trying to dig in on the research side. And the truth is, with all of these tools, there will be a level that's free. And then if you want something, there'll always be an opportunity to get the pro or the advanced version or what have you. But oftentimes the free versions will do a really good job. The other one I really like is, personally, I prefer Google's Gemini when I'm actually trying to build some assessment and resources and rubrics. One of the reasons I like it so much is because it shows you variations in drafts, right? So you'll prompt it. And again, understanding how to prompt these tools is as important as, anything else. But they'll show different drafts, and you can kind of pick and choose the ones you like the better, or you can take different pieces of each of those drafts. So I think it's just a better, more robust tool to be able to give you some options, and then continue to iterate from there. So those are two of my favorites, and there are far more that have a lot of different capabilities. So just time and energy to explore those tools in different ways. And others in the chat are putting a lot of really good items in there. And I think almost every vendor, from Adobe to Canva to Microsoft to Google, they're all starting to bake in AI components within their tools. So again, I also say maximize what you have. So if your institution is providing you some of these tools, then I would start there and start to see what they can do for you instead of going out and trying to find something else, right? Because then perhaps even within your institution, those will be supported, as opposed to some of the others that you're on your own for, and you may not have that level of support.
Anne, did you want to speak to any of the tools that you've included?
No, I think pretty much what everybody has included here. And if you're willing to pay for different ones, ChatGPT just came out with like a wickedly cool new model that does some amazing things. Copilot is also nice because it goes across Microsoft 365. There's Elicit, which is a really great research one. If you wanted to look at that and finds actual publications. The other reason why I like Copilot as opposed to ChatGPT is because I can find it links to sources. So I can say, where did you find that particular information? So that's really helpful. But Google Gemini Copilot, and I think even ChatGPT in the case of Arizona State. I don't know if they're doing this with regular universities, but they have created institution-specific ones where your data is not fed back into the model. So if that's something that you're concerned about on an institution-wide piece of it, then you can look at that as well. There are other really cool ones like University of Michigan is going to make their announcement tomorrow that every single undergraduate student will have their own personalized chatbot that will go through their Canvas courses, and they can make suggestions, recommendations, et cetera, like say, create a quiz for me for Math 118, and it'll do that. Or translate this into Chinese, it'll do that. So it'll go through as, or tell me when all of my due dates are coming up and create a schedule for me. It will do that. So I think they're all great options there. And if you're looking for free and you don't mind your data being used, I would suggest looking at K-12 sites that have done a really phenomenal job, like, because I'm still interested in the K-12 space. Magic School is one of my favorites. They create rubrics and poems and song lyrics. So if you want to put whatever it is to a Taylor Swift song, it does that. It's all very specific on education. So that's another nice tool to be able to use, and there's a lot of free stuff in there for educators.
Fabulous. So one of the other tools that I'm aware of is something called Julius AI. It's a statistics program that you can use for using large panel data. There's a number of other resources that are currently in the chat, and we'll try and save those and share those out with folks after the webinar. So as you can see, there's no shortage of tools that are available, and the field is moving rapidly as those tools are becoming available. That's certainly creating challenges for institutions, for higher education, and trying to keep up. And that creates opportunities for us as well, because it allows us to collaborate and think about new collaborations with industry. In fact, we recognize that AI is not bound to institutions of higher education, but it's actually being used more widely in private industry than maybe we had previously expected. It's also defining what users, future users, our students, should know and be able to do. And it's also thinking about how we creating new opportunities for how we think about spreading innovations across sectors. Chris, I'm going to turn now to some questions about how industry and higher education can work more closely together on using artificial intelligence. And so the first thing that I'll pose to you is what lessons do you think higher education should take from industries that are more advanced than we are in terms of their use of this technology?
Yeah, so I think we've covered some of these topics already in terms of the potential uses. When you look at all other industries that are probably more ahead of us in terms of their usage of AI, probably the first major push for it was in product recommendation in AI. So starting, say with Netflix and how they recommend movies to you to watch, and then of course in social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and all of their different AI techniques for being able to do these recommendations. That's then traversed into a lot of different domains. I mean, now we're talking a lot about self-driving vehicles, autonomous cars. We're talking about different monitoring analytics, say for the power grid, and all of that. And what doesn't matter as much in these industries, I would say, as it does in education, is the interpretability of the models that are being used. So in a lot of these applications, no one's necessarily as concerned with how decisions are being made, right? It's really more about what's the efficacy of those decisions at the end of the day, right? With product recommendation, for example, right? I can train a really complex neural network to basically predict what you would be clicking on next or what you would be most likely to buy. And the people that are creating those algorithms don't necessarily care about interpreting the ways in which these decisions are being made, how the inner workings of the AI models are happening. In the education space, interpretability is really very key, right? It's very important, right? Educators need to know why decisions are being made, right? So if suppose you had like a personalized tutor, for example, right? So if somebody is put down a certain learning path, a teacher or an instructional support specialist would need to be able to know why the decision was made, what signals were being used to ultimately make that decision, so that they can help and provide the best potential options to that student, right? So there are a lot of lessons we can learn in terms of taking the types of AI models that are being built, right? Whether they're, transformer architectures and large language models, or all different types of neural network models that are being created now and demonstrate tons and tons of successes across so many domains, right? Taking those and using them in the education space can automate certain tasks for us very well. So we need to learn from that. But we also need to keep in mind that at the end of the day, we need to know why these decisions are being made, right? And educators, I don't think will feel comfortable with AI, nor should they necessarily. They won't feel as comfortable with it until they can understand more about this. And that's really a very important challenge. I mean, it's one, there's a lot of research on explainable AI that's going on, and, causality in AI. And until some of these questions are answered, I don't know that we're going to see as widespread adoption in the classroom as we would hope.
So for some student populations, the availability or the access to AI creates a new equity challenge. Justin, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how collaborating with industry or leveraging partnerships with industry might help us address some of those new inequities that this technology creates.
Yeah, I think it's a really good opportunity, right? I think our industry partners, they have a need for students who are educated in how to use these tools, right? I think students that have been exposed to them and have used them are going to have a leg up on employees that have not had that opportunity, right? As our industry partners are looking for ways to be more efficient, right? How can their employees be more adept at doing work more quickly, analyzing things with a greater speed than I think we've ever seen before. So when we can lean on our industry partners to be able to tell us what it is that they're looking for, right? And then perhaps there's an opportunity for them to be able to help support some of the initiatives that we have going on, specifically here at Ivy Tech, right? So if they have that need, we partner with them. They have an opportunity to be able to help us be able to fund the use of these tools, integrate that into a classroom around their industry, perhaps have some skills training opportunities to level up and skill up existing employees, while we then take those same opportunities and build those into more traditional academic programs. So there's a lot of opportunity there in those conversations, and really, I think, mutual understanding of what the needs are, right? What are our needs as an institution, and then what are their needs as an employer, and when we can find some synergies there, then we have a real opportunity to make great gains for our students and make these tools more accessible to them.
And Anne, what about from your perspective at IU? How does the partnership with industry or collaboration with industry create opportunities for us to address some of these inequities?
I think looking at the internships in particular that is coming down the pipeline for K through 12 is something that I'm interested in. So sorry, I'm bringing back the K through 12 angle. But that's another way I think to, to spread that out, or whatever that might look like. I think this also, one of the things that we have to be careful about is with students, depending on where they are and where they might fall in terms of their scheduling, what that might look like. I heard in some places in the chat that there's a required AI course. Sometimes those are more of elective kind of courses. So, or we have some really cool courses like around like the black market and different things here, but you can only do that if you've met all of these other courses. So that's another thing I think I would like to be really careful of, is where we're building in courses and opportunities to learn about AI. And from the industry standpoint, I think anything that we can do for internships to say, here's where it's coming in from the actual industry that you want to pursue. I think all of those things are helpful.
Fabulous. Justin, I want to turn now to a question that, and I think Chris actually raised this earlier. We know that a lot of AI technologies have come out around, basically helping people make decisions about various things. One of the places where we can see AI being potentially used in higher education is providing career exploration and coaching. I wonder if you could give some insights into how this technology could potentially provide direction for students in terms of what they want to do professionally once they complete their training or school.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that I am certainly not an expert in this area. We've got wonderful individuals here at Ivy Tech that do this all day, right, and really work with our partners, work with our students to provide excellent career coaching. From what I understand, I think that there are a couple of areas where AI can really help with this, right? And I think the first is skill gap analysis and alignment. So we've been working with some partners at IQ4 as a part of the interactions with the Indiana Achievement Wallet. So how do we find opportunities to be able to bring credentials into a platform, right? We can assess all of the skills associated with those credentials and be able to start students down the road of seeing what skills they have. How do those skills align with different industries within the state of Indiana? And then where are their gaps? What do they need to do to then have an opportunity to be well positioned to take those jobs, right? Is there more schooling that they need to have? How close are they on their journey to being able to have a certificate that will make them qualified for something? So I think that's the first area that this really has an opportunity to impact our students and do that way more quickly, and then do that in partnership with a career coach so they can have really good conversations about what the potential career paths might be for those students, because oftentimes you may find something that you didn't even know, right? A student may have said, I want to go down this road, but they see something and they're like, oh, wait, I didn't even know that was a possibility for me. They thought that was unattainable, right? And so they see something that is within their grasp, and then we can help them to be able to go achieve that. And I think the other side of that is then what is the labor market analysis? What jobs are out there? What jobs are in demand? And how does that then take that skill analysis and that gap analysis that we just spoke about, and then better position them to have an idea of what they really should be investigating? Sometimes it's that want versus need. I'd like to be able to do this, but these areas are really in need, and I might identify with a choice over there that could actually better position me within the workforce. So those are a couple of ways that I can do it. And there are more, right, with resume review and coaching that you can have kind of more on a 24/7 basis, as opposed to waiting for somebody who's available to you. So you can get started more quickly, right? And again, I go back to what I said earlier. There's no substitute for that human interaction, right? But these tools allow us to get started more quickly, right? And get a starting point, and then take that and have a different conversation with our career coaches to be able to move the needle a little bit more. So I think that's the value add from our perspective.
And did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I love that idea. We have a tool that we're starting to integrate called Stellic in order to help with advisors and earlier touch points and following students through. But I think what Justin was talking about too, this brilliance of being able to have students be invested in that, ask those questions before coming to a career advisor, right? Because they don't know. Sometimes you don't have enough time to engage in those discussions as an advisor. The number of students per advisor, at least at IU, it would be overwhelming to keep track of all of those students and figure out what that looks like. I think one of the most powerful quotes that I try and apply to my own kids right now is, instead of asking kids what kind of job they want to have, ask them what kind of problems in the world they want to solve, because you can come at that problem from a lot of different angles, right? And so being able to solve that of what might it look like if we're talking about taking electives in other areas to help broaden your idea, or coming at the problem in a different way that's going to make you a really unique candidate in a particular job role. There are different instances. So like Georgia State has a chatbot named Pounce that was at least initially designed to reduce summer melt, but then it was expanded to assist with academic and career advising. So that's something that's actually contributed to their student engagement and satisfaction. I think University of Michigan also has an AI-driven mentorship platform to try and ensure a better fit between their mentors and mentees. So there are a lot of different unique things out there. And I think that's the other part that I would encourage everyone here, because of your ability and your background in higher education of what works. how can you use AI in order to help us solve some more of those problems with your unique expertise? What does this look like?
Fabulous. Chris, did you want to jump in here as well?
Yeah, I think just one other point I wanted to make regarding the opportunities that we have here. I may be a little bit biased here, because I actually myself, when I finished my PhD in 2016, I actually started a company in basically AI for education and AI for training and workforce development. And that company is still around today, but my point being, there are literally entire careers that you can build around looking at these issues specifically for AI in education, right? And not AI more generally, but specifically in AI for education and how that should be integrated. And so, I think that potentially encouraging even entrepreneurship in this type of in this type of area. There are a lot of things that the state can do in that regard, encouraging, potential spin out opportunities from universities and so on. I know we have a lot of that in general happening at Purdue, but probably not specifically for education, at least not that I'm aware of.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that. So we're getting close on time here, and I want to bring us to the last part of our conversation. It's undeniable that artificial intelligence has the potential to be a disruptive innovation in higher education. So let's now consider the future. If we think about the next 5 or 10 years, where do you see AI informing the work in higher education? I'm going to throw this question out to all of our panelists and let them give a short response on where they see this going in the next 5 or 10 years. Anne, do you want to go ahead and start?
What I am anticipating is that it'll be easier and easier to be able to do things. And for someone whose work has been in broadening participation in computer science and figuring out how do we teach students about computer science or get more folks to be able to code, I'm seeing a dramatic shift here with understanding more the underlying principles and abstract concepts within computer science, or how we might be able to use the world around us and convert that into data that can then be used by AI. So I see a greater shift as we're talking about that. But I think it will be easier and easier to engage with AI and get your answers back in a more useful format, right? So if you have an Alexa or Siri in your home, you can even see 3-year-olds adapting how they ask the question in order to get their answers back, right? So I think that as it learns more and more, it's going to be able to help us with the more laborious tasks and be able to do it in a way that's going to be more akin to what we want the output to be, so that hopefully we can focus on the next higher level thing. We just have to continue to keep up with the next higher level thing, in my mind.
Justin, do you want to take the next response?
I've had time to think about this one, and I don't know I have a great answer, right? Because I think that because of how rapidly this technology is evolving, it is really hard to say where we're going to be a year from now, let alone 5 or 10, right? But I do think, I agree with Anne, and I think that we're just going to have far more robust opportunities to engage with this, and it's going to be able to do far more, right? And give our students a real opportunity to interact with material differently. It's going to give us an opportunity to create differently. And then what I'm really interested to see is how is this kind of evolution of AI going to then meld with augmented and virtual reality to really create a more immersive space? That's what I'm really interested to see, because I think we've not really even touched on what those two technologies do in relationship to AI. So I think as everything gets better, they evolve more quickly. I'm really curious to see how that's going to come, and then how our students are going to be able to immerse in that in a different way and do that at home, where right now, where I think so many of those tools are only accessible right at a specific location or with a specific set of tools that the institution may have to buy. So that's going to be a curious space, and I really hope that evolves rapidly as well, because I think that has an opportunity to really drive things home in a way for students that we've never been able to do before.
All right, Chris, I'll give you the last word on this one.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I completely agree with Ann and Justin. It's hard to know where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years, let alone even where we're going to be in a month from now, as it pertains to AI, because it seems that something comes out every day, right? Something new. Who knows even how long the large language model boom is going to last, right? I mean, if you look at the progression over time, right, there are certain models that become very popular and then less popular and so on over time. So I think just a continued continuing to try to encourage folks to be educated on these topics, making sure our classrooms are staying the most up to date in terms of the types of material that we're teaching them. That's hard to do as well, because then it requires faculty to update their course content and everything, semester by semester, as opposed to, say, every couple years going back and doing it. So we need to provide faculty, I think, more tools to be able to make sure they can keep their courses up to date. As opposed to in traditional classes like, say, foundational mathematics, where things have been more or less constant for a while, right? So I think also encouraging a lot more project-based and laboratory-based work is really important, so that people can have opportunities to do research with real data sets and actually work on real data and try to apply what they're learning in the classroom to really solve problems as it pertains to AI modeling. Also, having engineers and the folks in STEM really try to envision much more what the end product of what they're doing looks like. That's something that gets lost so much when we're teaching, and myself as an educator, when I'm teaching and going through all the math equations and everything and deriving certain theorems, and these are all very powerful and at the core of the AI techniques, but understanding ultimately how to bridge that gap between that theory and then ultimately what needs to go out to the end user, right, and what they care about. Right. I think that we need a much more concerted effort around that in the next 5 to 10 years.
Fabulous. So I want to bring us to a close now, and I want to start by thanking our panelists today for their time and their contributions to this event. It's been wonderful to learn with you about this fast-moving topic. I think based on your comments, we've seen that the opportunities are great, the challenges are real, and that the ways in which we respond to this is really a challenge that we need to take on as a state. I also want to express my thanks to my commission colleagues for all that they're doing to support our students, and to express my thanks to the commission staff for helping to organize this event today. Now I'll turn things back over to Dr. Ken Sauer for some closing remarks. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Chad, and want to thank you in helping to shape this webinar right from the beginning, as well as our three panelists. I was certainly looking forward to just a wonderful conversation, and I had pretty high expectations, but indeed, I think they have been far exceeded. I think the conversation has been extraordinarily rich. And has suggested many ways in which we might continue this conversation. And on that point, I really want to come back to something that the commissioner stated that I totally share, which is we have a real passion about the opportunities that AI presents. And to be sure, there are challenges, and we have to recognize those as well. But we really feel that extended conversation about AI and the potential that it holds, both for developing our students in so that they can develop knowledge and skills in even better ways than we're doing right now, needs to continue. I think there are many other topics besides the instructional uses of AI that we need to think about as well. And certainly the commission is in a place, plays a role to cause the conversation to continue. And on that note, I really would invite all 275 plus participants in this webinar to think about how they might continue this conversation. What kinds of suggestions do you have for follow-up activities, not only through the end of this calendar year, this semester, but going on into next year as well? I think we really feel as though this conversation does need to be extended. And as I said, there are many areas in addition to the wonderful use cases that were discussed about the instructional uses of AI. So this, again, if you joined late, this session has been recorded. Every registrant will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And I certainly would invite anyone who missed part of this or those who stayed on to listen again, because again, there's so many topics were discussed and so many terrific ideas were advanced that we need to mull these over and think how we can turn these into action and how we can better support faculty to use AI. In addition, when you receive the email that has the link to the recording, we will also put together a short survey to elicit your ideas about topics that we need to continue conversation on. There were some topics perhaps that were not raised during this exceptionally rich conversation, and we'd like to know about those. We'd like to know your ideas about how we can continue this engagement and provide opportunities so that all faculty will be able to take full advantage of the opportunities presented by AI. And with that, I guess, unless anyone else has closing comments, at least from a commission standpoint, we're prepared to give you 5 minutes back to your day. But again, thank you, Chad. Thank you, panelists. Chris, Justin, and Ann. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I so appreciate all of the thought and creativity that you have brought to this conversation. So with that, unless anyone else has a closing comment, thank you all, and we will declare the webinar completed. Thank you.